My name is Tom Lacour, and I'm going to be your professor in this course. And I'll introduce my colleagues at GSIs in just a moment. I just wanted to draw your attention to this graph with, that we did very quickly on the word based on the frequency of these words: human rights, civil rights, natural rights, and humanitarian in English language sources in the last 200 years. And all I want to show you just for the moment, just to keep in mind, is that this gives you some sense of a history, of the historical conspectus of the course. In other words, these words have been around for a while, and we have little blips in the use of a term like human rights, which we'll explain in a moment. And then we have a post-World War II expansion, and then we have a post-Cold War big expansion. And you also see that some things arrive roughly together, civil rights and human rights, but they also have distinctive histories, or at least distinctive histories in the political discourse of the English-speaking peoples. And I suspect if we did this in French and other languages, which we'd find roughly the same, European language, we'd find roughly the same results. So this just is a very, very rough graphic representations of some of the key nodes of the history of these related terms. So this is our course. The number is not quite right. It's letters and it's history 187 and letters and sciences something else. So you're enrolled in this in two ways. Everyone's clear on that. And there may be some places left in the letter in one or the other of these assignments if you're having trouble getting in. This is all clear. Ooh. And this is the first lecture, and it's an introduction to the syllabus of the course and some historical and contemporary reflections on the question of human rights. So let me just say a little bit about the origins of this course, because it's unusual. I didn't just decide to teach a course about human rights. A group of undergraduates approached several faculty 3 years ago and said they were interested in the question of human rights and how one might be able to teach about human rights. And they said there were courses in the law school which were very good, which are about specific legal issues, international human rights or women's rights in particular places, or environmental rights. But there were no courses around that seemed to sort of deal with the subject in a sort of broader social, scientific, legal, and humanistic and artistic way. I mean, that is to say, no courses like this one that are meant to sort of look at the whole range of human rights theory, history, and practice. And so we had a year-and-a-half URAP, that is to say, undergraduate research apprenticeship program, in which teams of undergraduates went looking around the country about what other places were teaching in this country and in other countries. Did surveys of films and other kind of material that were available, and put together much of the material that's gone into this course. Then what happened is that the Discovery program, which runs these LNS courses, was looking for a course that was cross-disciplinary, and we, as URAP students and the faculty, offered this course to Letters and Sciences, the Discovery course, and it was first taught as that 2 years ago. And last year it was adopted by the History Department, though it probably won't be permanently in history, but History Department has adopted it, so that's why it's now Letters and Sciences and a history course. And it's become the foundation course for a human rights minor, which increasing number of students are signing up for, and which you can find on the LNS website. So that's the story of this course. So the course is unusual for a history course, and it's not just a history course that someone decided to teach about something, but grew out of these efforts to sort of think of human rights pedagogy, to think of something that for students who are not necessarily historians or political scientists or people who study law, but who want to have a broad conspectus of the field, and who might want to use this as a foundation for a minor. So let me just give you a very brief introduction to the course. So as I said, my name is Tom Lacour. I've been teaching here all my career, which is to say since 1973. I came when I wasn't very much older than you were, and I've stayed. What's there not to like? It's a wonderful place. And every time I've taught somewhere else, I was very happy to come back. So here I am. And the other courses I teach are an Introductory to Western Civilization, lecture course on death and dying, which I teach with a doctor friend, and occasionally British history. But this Western Civ and death and dying are my sort of bread and butter lecture courses. And then I've written a lot about the histories of sexuality, and in some extent about the dead body and death. And I've written about humanitarianism, which is how I got involved in this course. And I've written a bunch of articles on the history of humanitarianism, which play into this story of human rights pedagogy and the relationship of humanitarian impulse from the late 18th century on and human rights. And that my work has had sort of, it plays off of, as you'll see when I lecture you about it, literary and visual cultural questions as well. So that's me. Now, your GSIs this year are a group of people who come at the human rights and its allied topic from a variety of perspectives. Let me introduce you first to Hila Sasson, who is also the acting as head GSI. And it should be the person who's in charge of getting you into the sections and dealing with all the administrative questions. Her email is on here, and you can email her directly. And if you email me, I will forward those kinds of questions to her. She is Israeli. She did her undergraduate and master's degree at Tel Aviv University. And now she is working on, or beginning to work on a thesis on the history of NGOs, non-governmental organizations, in humanitarianism in late 20th century Britain. Chris Casey, who's sitting at the end here, was formerly in your shoes. He's from the Bay Area. He was a Berkeley undergraduate. He's interested in international and legal history, and one reason I'm particularly happy to have him as a GSI is he took some courses at the law school last year with actually some colleagues who will be visiting with us on the legal structure of contemporary human rights. Terry Renaud, who's here, is an intellectual historian of the 19th to 20th century Europe. His interest in human rights grows out of the critical reception of human rights had in the Marxist tradition amongst emigres, scholars from Europe to the United States in the 30s and 40s. And finally, Andrea Hrubinsky here. And she studies Japanese history. She's interested in hyper-nationalist manga. Now, there's a paper topic for some of you, if you want to go in this direction. And she's also written on the Tokyo tribunals, the sort of post-World War II trials of Japanese war criminals, war criminals. So that's a tricky word, which we'll talk about when we get to war criminals. Okay, so that's the GSI, and that's the team. The requirements. I think the syllabus makes it pretty clear. The reading is all in a reader and in books you'll be asked to read. The reader looks rather daunting. It's more daunting than really it is. I know every professor tells you that, but it's true. In part, that's because we couldn't figure out how to cut some legal case. For example, we're going to read Perez versus California, which is the case that overthrows anti-miscegenation laws in California. As you know, these legal cases are very long. And we thought, well, we won't give you any of this. We'll just have you read it on the web, which is a pain. But once we're not going to do that, we're going to print it. You can't just excerpt the legal case. So you won't have to read all the pages in that legal case, which is a chunk. So we cut a lot from last year, and we tried to keep it to sort of 40 or 50 pages a week. There'll be occasional extra handouts and things we'll have on BSpace. There'll be occasional, in fact, there will be more movie clips, which we'll ask you to see on YouTube, or which we'll put up. I just got word that Stephen Okazaki, who's an award-winning, twice Academy Award-winning film director, will be here near the end to talk to us about his films about Hiroshima, in a discussion with Alan Tansman, who's in East Asian literatures. So we're going to have a little more stuff, actually often we're going to have little film clips that we ask to see ahead of time, sometimes in class. So basically, The readers in this ZZZ copy, which is on your syllabus, and the books should be in the bookshop soon, but you don't need them for a while. And if you don't want to buy them in the bookshop, all of these are books that some of you might have from high school. I'm sure most of you read Heart of Darkness in high school. Everyone reads Heart of Darkness in high school. So you probably have it, and the other books are readily available secondhand. But we've ordered them, so you can get them. The midterm, it will be an in-class midterm based on questions that you will given ahead of time, which and will have been discussed in sections, which are about either the particular text from the reading, which you'll be asked to discuss, or broader questions which ask you to connect reading. So we'll give you, let's say, 5 study questions, and 3 of them will be on the exam, and 2 of them and you'll have to write on 1, or whatever percentage makes you study 3 questions. I should be able to do this in my head, but I can't. So there. Movies, in addition to the clips, there's one, quote, required movie. That's a movie we'd all like you to see. It's a newly discovered movie on Nuremberg. Maybe you saw it in the theaters last year. It was just out. It's sort of fascinating, both in itself. It's called Nuremberg. It's Lessons for Today. It's made in Germany, Nuremberg und seine Lehre. We're showing it on Tuesday the 27th at 7 o'clock in general. I'll provide popcorn. But if you don't want to watch it then, you can watch it at Moffat. It'll be on reserve. It's an interesting film, both because what it says substantively about Nuremberg and because of the history of its repression. This was the film was made, everyone liked the film, then the Cold War came along and the film's politics were very different, and no one heard about the film until the year before last. So the film will be interesting in itself, and the film will be interesting as an example of the way in which human rights discussions are part of broader political discussions. When I did this before, I showed the old Maximilian Schell award-winning Hollywood movie called Judgment in Nuremberg, which is really good. And if any of you are interested in that subject of retroactive justice, you might think of a paper that deals with a bunch of these films or compare those 2 films. But the Hollywood film is a very straightforward, the heroism of the Nuremberg Tribunal. This film is a much more politically nuanced and complex one. Okay, so that's on your syllabus on the 27th. Section work. We're down to here. They meet this week, as you know. Attendance at section is required. So I should all be very clear. And the GSI, we're all going to get together and we're going to think of section questions every week, and you're asked to respond to one of those for a half page every week. I think that's all pretty clear on the syllabus. Lecture format. So what I'm going to do is try to lecture in 20-minute blocks, little sections, and then pause for questions. I also want to say that I really am open to questions anytime. I actually like questions anytime. I have been a student. I know it seems ages ago, and I know that it cannot be done listening to lectures for 90 minutes. It's beyond human capacity. I'm not even sure it's possible for half an hour. So you know that. I know that. So interrupt the flow of lectures by questions whenever you feel like it. But I will sort of demand that you do that in every 20 minutes. Clear? I'll just stop talking. Visitors. So you'll notice in the lecture there are more visitors than in many classes. And that's a part of the discovery aspect of the course. We'll have colleagues from history, from East Asian languages and literatures, from law. We're going to have one joint class with the law school, course on women's rights, with